Welcome to Waterminds Studio. This is a podcast for working in the water and wastewater industry. Today, I'm excited that we have our first guest, Alan Hudson with VT SCADA. And really what we're trying to do with this podcast is try to elevate the user's knowledge in our industry and use this as a different method to really stay up with technology since it's changing so fast and be able to use these different avenues to keep up with that. So really starting out, one of the things that stands out to me about VT SCADA is the instantly intuitive aspect, and it's something that we've tried to incorporate into our SCADA system. So could you tell us a little bit about the instantly intuitive for you guys?
Yeah, I sure can. It's really great that you're having this event as well. You're trying to stay up with technology, where things are going these days, and how do you train people? Our consumer industry looks at everything from how we use our phones to our cars and other things to make it to where it's instantly intuitive already. You take something as complex as a SCADA system, how do you make sure you turn on the right pieces and parts in a plant to make sure they're doing the right thing? That's one aspect, but on the configuration side, you can really burn a lot of time and effort and almost endless energy trying to make things happen when it is really of no value on the other side.
What we've seen on some of the intuitive, and if you traditionally look back at some of the interfaces and things like that,
Yeah.
They have tried to take, control dials and things like that were physical and pull that into the SCADA system to
Right.
try to make it intuitive because they were used to seeing these things. So with technology changing, some of the newer operators, they have different ways. They're using, tablets and different browsers and things like that they are more accustomed to. So it's trying to find something kind of in between where it's not just these old, control buttons, but some of that stuff does make it intuitive. And
Right.
for us, we've used the 3D aspect of it, that it is something that when you walk out there and see the plant, that you can bring that back into the interface and that becomes intuitive to them. So
That's right. And so, when we look at it from our configuration standpoint, how do we create a VT SCADA software package that a system integrator can take and now customize in such a manner that it is intuitive for their customer, which is that operator most likely, or sometimes a manager wanting to do a report, or perhaps an IT person wanting to make sure that everything is configured right with their system architecture. When it looks at software, one of those old sayings is, oh, it can do anything, it's just software. Well, that's true, but it can be really, really, really hard software. So our side of VT SCADA and instantly intuitive is how do we make the software itself to where the functionality around it is very intuitive? And then how can we make it to where guys like you can take it, implement it, and make it even more intuitive for those operators?
So it's not just intuitive for the operator, or from your standpoint, you're not just trying to make it intuitive for the operator, it's intuitive for the developer too.
That is correct. That is correct. And so for us, it all depends with simplicity, with transparency, with making things where you think they ought to be and how they should work. And we would begin with that from our side of how our website looks. We want everything to take a look, or to begin there so that it becomes intuitive. Let's take a look at the website.
Let's get into it.
Robert, one of the things that is very encouraging for me is we're able to work with anyone's system, however old they may be or how new they may be. We have a listing on our website here of the compatible operating systems. And you can see, even to the latest versions of Server 2016, for example, we try to keep up with everything that Microsoft is doing. When they come out with their patches, their vulnerabilities, we close those things immediately. It's really important for us to take care of our customers in that respect. But we also understand that we have many other ways of people looking at data. And so as it shows here on the screen, the operating systems for HTML5 devices and those kind of things are very, very important.
Now on the updates, do you release something that shows which patches that they should have or that you support? You send an email out? How does that?
We do. So what happens is when we have new changes, new updates, we automatically test those with our own internal servers for a while. And that way make sure everything is compatible for every previous version that we have today. And then the second thing we do is we have beta test sites real world systems running on servers, actually talking to field devices in water, wastewater plants, and making sure that it runs there as well. Then it's available for consumer download. It's an FTP site, so at the customer's leisure, they simply go and they pull the file down. It's a single file, a zip file. Inside that zip file, we actually list in a Word document what the changes are. We don't want to pull the wool over anyone's eyes and not admit something that wasn't working quite right. What you'll find in that is we'll typically have about, I'll just say 15 or so incidents that have been cleared. So bug fixes, patches, maybe it's ours, maybe it's Microsoft, it's whatever. Those are taken care of. And any kind of feature benefits added since the last release, which may have only been 4 to 6 weeks ago, those also show up. And so now the customer gets the best of all worlds. Some customers run a version or two behind in case there's something that maybe it wouldn't be caught yet. And some people say, I'm not going to make a change but once a year. So they have their own points at which they want to keep that up to date. And we support that all the way across. When you call Doug or Jennifer at 855 VT SCADA, they help you on whatever version you have. They're not going to say, well, gee, you've got to get current and then we'll help you. No, they don't do that. They just say, let me help you where you are today. Because customers are the ones that should be driving our conversations.
Now on the support, do y'all have a test machine that y'all typically do, or are y'all actually just remoting directly into the machine?
That's a great point. So we have a couple different things. So we do have test servers, and they are always into those as well. Let me just show you under the website, if I go to Contact and Technical Support, you'll see a place down below that for the remote support. And they will give you that launch screen connect code. And now they can connect in, fix the issue, say, is this what you were wanting to have happen? They can say, yes, it is. Thank you very much. And they disconnect, and now you go on your merry way. If you have any more problems, they can connect it again. Another thing you can do is actually take the software, the version, the application, and zip it up. I'm going to show you how to do that later on, make a change set, and send that to tech support. They can now run on their system. We even have hardware, many PLCs and RTUs that we can now connect into and verify what is taking place locally.
Yeah, the change set's something that you don't see in any other package really, where you're typically having to just back up the entire project or kind of export pieces out manually to get it on site if you've done the development off site. So that's a huge benefit, I think, for VT SCADA.
And I'm going to show you that here in just a moment. Our technical support thing, we also offer one other thing where our tech support folks, in addition to training, our tech support folks actually connect into customers. And that would be our VT SCADA Fest. It's the last icon on the screen. And what you'll see on the VT SCADA Fest is this year in Orlando, Florida, coming up January the 16th and the 17th. We have 2 full days with many of our developers, tech support people, even the president of our company will be there as well. And you can engage in conversations.
Yeah, I went last year. We brought 4 people down there.
That's
we
right.
had a great time.
It was great, wasn't it? It was fun. It was also educational, great networking event. All across the board, it was just great.
Well, it's they break it up to where you have the ear of some of the guys, like sitting down with Pat and saying, hey, we got some features that we like, and you actually get to feel like that they're going to incorporate some of that, or hey, yeah, we have some options for this, or maybe we could adapt that feature to where when you go to some of these conferences, you're really there more for just the features that they currently have. It's not really this engagement with the integrator.
And from our standpoint, it's not meant to be, here's a video testimony you can watch. It's not meant to be a sales presentation for us. It really is meant to be technical as it shows on the screen here. The other, I'll just say there's the president of our company, Glenn. One of the things he wanted to make sure he did was have what he calls a developer's den. So at that point, there'll be, I think there were about 5 tables that were set up, all that were running VT SCADA with whatever applications. And so customers had a chance to come and say, here's what I'm trying to do, how do I do it? Or here's a cool idea. What do you think it would take to make that happen? And so those developers there, they are our developers of the software kernels. And they'll be taking notes, they'll be working through things, they'll find any kind of shortcomings. Sometimes they'll say, well, we're actually working on something along those lines. Would this work for you when it's implemented? So yeah, they're very open and forthcoming about what we're working on. It is a great event. So if you can come, please be a part of that. We are limiting the number this year. Our facility only allows about 250 people. So we want to make sure that you get in under the gun.
Yeah, we got 2 guys coming down, so I think we'll have a great time.
Fantastic.
And even when you do hear Glenn speak, you can tell he is very passionate about it and
He is.
very involved in the development side of it. It's
That's
not
right.
just a top level. He's down there. It seems like, he's looking at this, all the features and really has his hands in it.
It is fun to watch somebody that 32 years ago came up with this idea and still has the same passion today that he had that long ago. And he's only like mid-50s, so it's going to be around for a long time. He's going to be around for a long time. It is just going to be fantastic to watch as we continue to grow and expand throughout the U.S. and the globe for that matter. So that's it as far as the website is concerned. Feel free to look at this and sign up. I think we can sign up all the way till the beginning of January as long as we have open spots available. So take advantage of it.
Yeah, well, I might have to get down there myself.
Good. Well, if you don't mind, I would like to get off of the website and let's get into the software itself. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do that.
One of the things that makes us unique as well is that when we go do presentations somewhere, we often use our software to show the presentation. Yes, we could give a PowerPoint. We can go through all of those. Here's what it should do. My thing is, let me show you what it does do. And if you have any kind of questions, you can say, yeah, but Alan, how do you do so-and-so? And since I'm just a sales guy, so to speak, what you'll find is I'll say sometimes I'm not really sure, but I'll find out, and I'll take notes about that. But many times I'll say, here's how you do it. So if I'm just looking at my software, I know you've got a number of things that you like about the software, and I'll just say this as a plug for MR Systems, is that you guys have been known for a lot of years of being on the cutting edge, and not only software, HMI, SCADA software, but also communications, PLCs, and even panels. And so what I like to see is how you guys have taken VT SCADA and taken it to another level to incorporate your years of all these different SCADA softwares together into what you're using it for today in your installations. And that's fantastic. So if I just look at my navigation, what you'll see is I have numerous tiles on the screen, if you will. And so in this case, it's a folder. And if I click on that folder, I bring up another set of displays. All of this is live data, so we are pretty unique in that fashion. So this would be 4 different displays on the same computer screen. Since we are Windows-based, we can support the multi-monitors as you would with any Windows device.
And navigation is one of the areas that we, in other packages, we kind of, because they were lacking the navigation,
Right.
so we try to come up with something across the board that we could do in each of the packages. But as we did come to VT SCADA, with the navigation that was already
Yeah.
there, we had to make the decision that using the built-in navigation was
Right.
better than trying to build something of our own on top
Sure.
of it already. So I really do like the full being able to do the live tile views and
great.
things like that. So
Great. It's always good to hear how people are actually doing it in the real world. What a guy shows in a demo is great and wonderful, but it's what shows up on site that really makes the difference. That's great. Well, we just got finished with a SCADA shootout last week. In fact, in one of the conversations, one of the points, the questions you had to answer was, show me your operator navigation. And even at that, some operators are more advanced than others, so how do you work within that as well? And so that became a lot of fun as I showed this around. So if I go back to the screen here, you can see those 4 displays. Of course, we have our navigation buttons. We can go backwards and that kind of thing. You can drop the screen and show the most recent screens you were at, which the displays you were looking at. I usually like to maximize what I have on the screen, so I don't really use that very often. But some customers do like that. Of course, the forward and backwards button, this takes you home as well. At the bottom left-hand side, the far bottom left, we actually can see a listing of all the different displays. And so these are the ones that I've configured and said, based upon my password authority, that I now have access to these displays. And that's all great and wonderful. I can go straight to one of those tabs. If I'm over on this one right here, for example, and I want to go back to the major tile display, I'll just simply click on that square of squares, and it comes back to that major point. Within this, again, I have complete control of my menu system. I don't want to drive too far away yet, But I will say if I come up to the top and click on this tag looking thing, we do use a tag structure for all of VT SCADA. And I'm going to click on Show Children to show the full implementation. But if I look under Menus and under Page Menu, you can now see the difference in those menus. And so I can easily take a display that might be here, take it and copy it or move it to a different tile as well. So you have full command of how you're going to be utilizing your menus. So I didn't want to get too far into that yet, but just for a few moments. The other thing I want to show you around this is at the bottom, I have a number of quick links, if you will. If I click on these, it brings up different pages. Now, right now, I am logged on as a basic view only. Normally, you don't have a screen that is open without any kind of interaction with any kind of password authority. In this demo case, we do. Sometimes you may want to have one that's a read-only, and that might be open to whomever. We do know municipalities that are using that to show on their website. So if a customer wants to see what the status of their water system is, they can see the dashboard at that level.
Now, on the client side, can you restrict the user depending on the location he's at, or the device be read-only?
You can. A device, not necessarily, but from a username, password, the answer is yes. The other part of that was security, if it's using a VPN or SSL, or maybe Active Directory, or perhaps even a two-factor authentication like OpenID to connect. Those might also be a restriction part of that. What's neat about that, I'll show you in just a second, is if I'm looking, for example, at the bottom here, I have those 4 screens. Let me log on as somebody different. Allen, that's a pretty good username password. And when I press OK on this one, you're going to see those tabs at the bottom change. So now I have more based upon the way I left it last time. And so if I want to click around now and say I have these, fantastic.
And this is gonna follow me as I go to
That is correct.
different terminals or anything like that.
That is correct. So as a username password, it follows you wherever, exactly. And the way this works is, let's just say I'm on water distribution system right now, which is this one. There's this little X. Let me X out of that. It is now gone off of my quick menu. If I want to add it back, let me just go to that screen. I'll go to here, I'll go to here, and now I'll bring up that water distribution. And now at the end, you see a little push pin looking thing. So if I press that in, it is now pinned to the bottom. And this is before the days of Pinterest. So they followed us in this manner. But then now it's part of the screen. So it really becomes the user, the operator, who has full command of what they're looking at.
Well, that's a pretty cool feature because they're not having to go look for it, kind of throwing it up there, allowing them to interact with
That's
it
right.
or save it at that point, not go back around, go look for that in some folder
That's
and then
correct.
add it in there.
That's correct. So when it says I signed in as Allen, let's go back up here to the username password area. So if I click on that, what you're going to see is a variety of things. So OpenID Connect would be one of those two-factor authentication mechanisms. If I look under options, options lets you do a number of things that you would expect to see. That should be the right way to say that, because in anyone's username password schemes, you should have this ability. And if you don't, then you should maybe look for something that does. But one of the things initially is this enable Windows security integration. Windows Active Directory is becoming more and more prevalent. I don't see it everywhere, but normally where there's an IT department that wants to use something for protection, they'll use that Active Directory. All I have to do is check the box, and now all of a sudden it knows to go look at the Active Directory. I don't have
Well,
that.
with security being such a big concern now, I think the push is, they are having domains.
That's right.
They are using Active Directory.
That's right.
So the two-factor authentication is, I think, something that a lot of our customers have been asking for recently.
Right.
And some of the other packages haven't really integrated that into their package very easily. So that's a huge benefit.
You are correct. While I'm touching on that, let me just say one more thing about our Windows Active Directory configuration. We support both Windows Active Directory accounts as well as non-accounts. And that can be important because maybe you have a contractor come onto a site. You don't want them to have AD authentication. You want them to come in, do the work on the system, and then get out. So we support both of those simultaneously.
Or have to contact IT and go
Exactly.
through that whole ordeal.
Exactly. We may have IT people listen to this, so we don't want to badmouth them too much, but nobody ever likes IT. Of course, the IT folks don't like OT, so we're in a quandary, right? So our job is to make those pieces go together.
Yeah, we've been working
easily.
really hard to kind of pull those together and just,
That's right.
work with the IT people a lot more.
And that's such a powerful part because both groups have their skills and their expertise and their reasons for doing it a certain way.
Well, in the past, I think that they probably are, the concerns are legitimate concerns
They
because
are.
they haven't really secured some, when I go into some of the plants, they're not really that secure.
That is
So
correct.
it's elevating them to the level of what the IT people see as necessary.
That is correct. That's correct. One more thing, and I will stop talking about the roles and responsibilities and accounts and that kind of thing. But we have all these privileges, and at the bottom of these privileges, we have an area we can actually make application-specific privileges. So maybe in the system, they say, you know what, for this group of pumping stations, only a certain level of people, only certain folks can look at those. So we can make that a control privilege for that application alone. So that can become as customizable as you want it to become. And so if I cancel out of that and look at my accounts, under the accounts area, when I create, for example, here's Alan, and I have my username and my passwords and all those kinds of pieces, I can now assign privileges and roles. Those roles could be according to roles I've made default. And by the way, those become totally a part of the application itself. Or I can look in here and give a specific access. For example, I've given Alan internet client access. If I check that box and press apply, then no longer am I able to have internet access. I can check the box again, press apply, and now Alan does have the ability of coming in as a thin client. I could disable Alan. I'm not going to do that one because then I'll be out. I can disable Barry, for example. And now you can see where Barry is grayed out, and he can no longer log in. Maybe Barry's on probation for a couple of weeks, and now he comes back. He's doing well now. I can now enable him again and press apply. Again, it gives you complete control over usernames and passwords, which security, as you said, is a really, really key part of our system.
One of the things I do like about, a lot of the features that you're being able to pull up like that is a lot of times you're having to go into a development mode and then make these changes and then launch the runtime. And really this whole intuitive part, like the navigation, it's already kind of laid out for you. You're not just you don't just start with a blank slate,
Right.
and you're having to totally go in and do your own navigation completely to where you're going to see something as you go to different plants is going to be completely different depending
That's
on
right.
the integrator that's done it. So y'all have done a really good job on kind of laying out the navigation and making a lot of these features already built into it. And a lot of that is intuitive because it is very similar to most browsers and things like
Right.
that people are already accustomed to.
Sure.
So they've already kind of trained themselves and they can adapt to this a lot easier.
Exactly right. And that's a great point. The only thing that you cannot do with a system up and running is actually put a new version on. Other than that, everything is done live on the system. So you're really never taking it down and coming back up together. Fantastic.
And the tag part, I'd like to really go over the whole object-oriented and how quick it is to
Sure.
be able to add in a new RTU or a new
Right.
pump.
Yeah. Well, let's do that. Let's do that next.
All right.
So, Robert, you mentioned talking about the tags, and you're right, the tag is the core of any kind of SCADA system. One of the things that we do that is very different is, if I click on the tag, we use this kind of a structure, a tree structure, a lot of parent-child relationships. Let me go and make that big screen, I guess. And what you'll see there is, if we look at our menu side on the left, I was looking at menus earlier, you can see how that would come in. It's kind of weird to think about your displays being a part of a tag, but that's how we just like to do our structure. If I look down toward an area like this water distribution system, now I have my organization set for water distribution, and then my zone 1, for example, and then below that we have the pump, for example, and all the different points below that. It lets me look at all kinds of things when I look at my navigation as well. I can take show children or take that off, so basically show the things underneath that. So that whole parent-child relationship. I could look over here and type a name in, let that be a wildcard, and it would now show up the different names that I want. I could even say over here, let me look at a particular type of a tag, for example, a digital status tag, and now only those show up.
And you're also getting the real-time value in that too.
And the real-time value, exactly right, that is showing here on the side. Thanks for pointing that out as well. And that's a great point. Let me take a quick break on the tag thing because our historian is built in. A lot of folks say, okay, great, I'm a SQL guy, I'm an OSI Pi, whatever. Those are fine as well. Great, great historians, have been for many, many years. But they're also expensive, they're cumbersome, it's another license to handle and to deal with. But IT folks know how to do SQL programming, so in that case, they like it. Well, our historian is built in. It is our own proprietary historian. It is default. It is there already. There's no additional license for it. It is a file-based historian. It's about 5 times faster than a SQL database, and the way it compresses about 1/5 the size of a SQL database.
Oh, wow.
So really, from a disk space management standpoint, it really is powerful. But if they say, no, I need to have that external, again, OSI Pi will say, okay, fantastic. We can actually, with an ODBC interface, which is included, we automatically can ship that data over to the external database.
And then even on, the file-based compared to SQL, if you had to bring up, a second machine or restore,
Right.
The process of taking that historical data and syncing it is pretty seamless.
It is. In fact, I was going to kind of save the redundancy part for a
Okay.
bit later on, but I'll go ahead and since you mentioned it. So yes, redundancy is easy, if you will, because it's just a copy paste. What we do different is it's synchronized redundancy. So you're right, even when there's latency of communications, or you take one down, you bring it back up later, or you make changes on one, the historians are still synchronized regardless. And now let's say you bring up a third level redundant unit, another server. Maybe you have a water plant has dual servers, and now you're going to bring up another server at the administration building. Well, with a matter of a few setup pieces, configurations, now that administration building can be another redundant server, and that database now becomes synchronized with the other two. You can now have another at the wastewater plant, for example. There's no limit to how many redundant servers you can have, and all those become synchronized. So yeah, that is a really key part. And we're going to make all of our changes online, like we said. So you make the change, it becomes synchronized when you publish those changes rather.
And then how do you add a tag to be historized?
Yeah, let me show you that. So for example, I'm here under this water distribution. Before we go there, let's just look real quickly like at a COM port here. So there's a COM port. I could right click and say what kind of a thing is that. I'll look at properties, which will say it is a serial port driver. And here's COM3. I can look at my various settings. I can look at my display if I want it to show up a certain way on the screen. All those are just configuration parameters. If I look at here, I can define it to a certain area. Maybe I have an area for my water system or my wastewater system, or maybe my blower buildings or some other part of the system. I can easily segment that out. We're seeing a lot these days where a municipality might have water, wastewater as their primary SCADA, but they may also have cable and or gas, natural gas, and probably even power as a part of their utilities. So you could actually combine all those together so a municipality can see everything under one roof. In that case, the area makes great sense. So if I look back at the demo part here, I'm looking at that serial port. So of course, when you configure this, you configure a port first, followed by a driver. So this would be a Modbus driver. If I look at that right click, again, same kind of configuration parameters. Here's the ID name. I give it a name. I can give other areas and criteria. Other options attached to it, again, Ethernet or serial. If you need to change little bits around, we've made it to where it's so easy to make those changes by checking a box. And immediately, as soon as you press OK, it's immediately live in the system.
And these
So now,
drivers are built right into
they're all
the
built in. We have a little over 200 drivers built in today for a variety of PLCs, RTUs, and specialty equipment. And they're all built in at no charge.
And you're not having to go out and get a separate license, to go
That is correct.
support each different type of device that you have.
That is correct. Some people say, well, I already have my OPC server configured, I just want to use OPC. That's fine. We have an OPC configuration as well. But sometimes they'll say, I really don't want to do that. I want to let the direct driver be my mechanism. And that's what we would suggest as well. Then the question becomes, who handles the polling? Do I have a data concentrator polling, or do I let the computer do the polling? Our answer would be, which way do you want to do it? We have the polling built in. We can actually synchronize polling. You can change schedules. You can change the RTS, CTS delays. You can change those times, but you can also go to fast poll, or you can say, nope, I'll just talk to my data concentrator and see the data there. It's whatever the architecture demands. That's what we want to live within. So a little more setup here. If I have my serial componentry here for that driver, if that's a Modbus Plus in this case, virtual I/O. If I'm looking at a CIP driver, so for Allen Bradley CIP, then you can actually support tag browsing as well. So you click on the point, as long as you're connected up to that Allen Bradley PLC, up comes the tags that are configured, and you select those points. Again, how do you make life easy for them? But here's a question. What if I don't know, for example, what to do with all this? Well, we have context-sensitive help screens built in throughout the entire software. If I just simply press the F1 key, we see context-sensitive help come up for that area that we're on right now.
Oh, wow.
In almost every case, you have that ability. A few of them didn't come up quite right, so you can do a search. I could say, let me just click on this and just type on anything that's Modbus. And now everything with Modbus comes up. And I can go very quickly and look at like Modbus error codes, for example, and now I have them. And that is built into every package, including that free VT SCADA Lite package. It's consistent throughout.
Now, I know a huge issue sometimes that we have with drivers are if we're using a protocol converter,
Right.
and we are talking Ethernet to that, sometimes the driver is going to think it's talking to an Ethernet device.
Correct.
And those different packages don't have the capability to slow down that communication. So
Right.
it's serial on the other side.
Yeah.
And you guys have that kind of built
We
in.
do. We do. Let me just show you a quick example of that. In fact, in the same product tree or the communication tree, the next thing down is RTU1, for example. If I right click on that one, I look at properties. I now have the ability of changing some of those settings. So this actually did a context display. I did the wrong one. That's okay. I'll right click on the one below that though, the analog point, and lo and behold, you can see a variety of those things as well. For example, the I/O and even where it's going to. And you can change those pollings there as well. Now this brings up a great point. I'm looking at an analog status. So if I look at a couple different ones here, the one below that, actually all of these you can see right here are all analog status points. Well, what if I want to look at that and say, I meant to have an analog input, what's the difference? So I'll just look at this and let me add, sorry about that, add a new child, and I'll look at my analogs. Under analog, here's an input, and now I can put information in about that. Again, press F1, we get the help screens, and one of those questions is, what do I do about analog input or analog status? Why would I use one over the other? In our case, we would say, here's what analog status does for you versus what an analog input does for you. So like everybody, for many years, we had analog inputs, analog outputs. As the demands for analog inputs and outputs, for that matter, became greater and greater, we started adding those functionalities built into the status point. And so in this case, I would say my personal preference is the ability of having, where is it here? The logger built in on change. So that would be the historian, basically. So if I go back to my analog, my application rather, and look at this analog status tag, here's the I/O, that's the easy part. But look at the far right-hand end, here's the historian. Under the historian, number one, where do I want this thing to be historized? So for example, I can look at the tree and go to some other relative path for an off-site historian if you want to, or even some other server with the VT SCADA historian, or I can say let it just be normal with the normal path we're in today. Enable logging, that lets you have the control over whether you log a point or not to the history. If I make it 0, then no longer is this going to historize that point. Or I can leave it as a 1, And now it will historize that point. So anything 0 does not historize, a non-zero does.
Now, is that data still there? And then once I enable it again, it's going to start logging, right?
That is correct. The data is still there. Thank you. Other thing I can do is make an expression and say, let me just make this to where I have some if-then type statement. I only want to historize this water tank, for example, when it's online and when it's being utilized. Then that becomes criteria that I can use to historize or not. Or I can say, throw another tag in there and let that tag change from a 0 to a 1 or vice versa. Control the logging of that data.
Now, I do have a unique situation where a customer right now, it's a small municipality. They want something that later on could be scalable.
Right.
They're wanting to use one workstation, but kind of one of the things that they've really pointed out is, they're really looking at some reports. They want to also be able to manually enter data in there where typically, with a lot of the packages, we're querying a historian.
Right.
We write our own custom reports.
Yes.
And then if the operator wants to manually enter something, we're having to create some other method to get it into either, some other SQL database. Right. So when our report runs, it's really hitting a historian and hitting our SQL database to kind of pull this report together. And, in this case, how would you handle that if would you use a display and just be able to enter data and then let it actually be a historized tag?
That's a great point. So we have a couple different ways we can do that. If, in fact, let's just say we're getting data from a laboratory system, like a Hawk WIMS, for example, we have an OPC connector that can grab all that data and pull it into VT-SCADA's historian. If it's a CMMS package, a maintenance package, the same kind of things, either through OPC, ODBC, or some CSV format, we can send data back and forth. What happens more than anything is we'll see that, let's just say we have a turbidity meter that is looking at the purification of the water, and now all of a sudden it starts reading out of scale. And maybe it's on a Saturday afternoon. And so the operator takes a log of it, he goes and takes a sample, comes back, verifies 2 or 3 times to make sure that the water is drinkable, that there's not a problem, it really has to be the instrument. What does he do with that? Well, we would say in that case we're going to take the alarm, we're going to show you this in a moment, take the alarm and now add a note in there, an operator note into the historian indicating this turbidity meter is not acting correctly. I'm taking manual readings every hour to verify we're good. Okay? The operator is now taking stance of saying this is going to be right. Now let's say it's Monday. And so now George comes in and he's going to go take a look at that turbidity meter. He realizes, okay, it needs a new part. I'm going to order a part. The part comes in and he installs it. By Wednesday, everything is great. So what do you do in between all that? You're right, we are logging data, or if I can take this to a 0, it's not going to log data, or if I leave it as a 1, it will log that data, so at least we have the logs. We have the ability of doing a after the fact data entry correction to that historian. Oh, wow. And now it does a couple different things for you. Number one, you have to manually say this is a new data entry. It's going to overwrite an older data entry. But not only overwrite, we're going to keep the data that was in there first. Here is the revised one. So now we have both. So now when your environmental protection folks, EPA or in Alabama's ADEM or whoever it may be, they come and say, oh, what we're wrong here, you can say, here's what I read, here is what I tested, here's the new value, the correct value. And now that's in my historian. And so now we can key upon that for our historical reporting and those kinds of things, but yet we have a historized record.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool feature.
Exactly. Those notes that the operator put in, those are also part of that. So now let's just say you're audited 3 months later. You now have a written, archivable, audit trail-based record saying what is right and what is not right. Another part of this cool thing I'll show you real quickly is when we're looking at logging something, let's just say this is a pressure point. Well, surely you're not going to log the pressure every time it moves 0.001% or whatever that scale is. Sometimes you say, you know what, I really only want to log this if it changes by, we'll just say two units of whatever that units of measure may be. When I press OK, now all of a sudden it has to change 2 units before it logs it again. That just lets you have something like a filter level, for example, that is modulating little by little by little. And you really don't want to log that constantly. It's really not important that way. Sometimes you have something that is, and so you want to leave that as really important. Along the same thing, looking at this analog status tag, I looked at the I/O tab. The next tab over is scaling. This is very common. It's whatever you're reading it from. Sometimes it's already in engineering units, 0 to 100, for example, for percentage. Sometimes it's in counts, 4095 or 32767 or 65535, and that's okay. You can put that in here, put your process scaled value here, and you can even clamp those here as well if you want to, change your units, and now you're off to the races. The next thing has to do with alarms. So now from this alarm status tag, I can create a low alarm and I can create a high alarm. And now I have a number of different things here. It says here critical, high, warning, notice, and event. This goes into the ISA 18.2 criterion. That standard they created has been out about 10 years or so now, after a 10-year study of operator fatigue and how to best handle alarms. Those are built in. I can easily say, it's a critical alarm for high, for example. What's that set point going to be? Again, a constant, an expression, or another tag. Is there a deadband attached to it as well? So you don't have an alarm oscillating back and forth. You can have a delay. So let's just say a level has to hit this level and stay there for some period of time before now it does alarm you. And then we have ability of disabling or enabling, because that does happen. A transmitter goes out, you need to disable the alarm. And then we have a rearm time. A rearm means if there's been so much time elapsed and no one has responded to it, we're going to let that be another alarm point to remind them. And all that is done within this alarm status tag.
And these all can be done during runtime.
During runtime. In fact, an operator from the right location, even within the alarm summary tab, we're going to show that in a moment, can now go and change those points immediately. So on a Saturday afternoon, he's not stuck with having the wrong thing go off all the time.
Because this is another thing that in a lot of packages we've had to build our own interface to try to write to different fields and things like that to be able to manipulate this during runtime.
Right.
It's all in the development, package, but the operators wanting to be able to do that without having to have somebody with, get on a machine that has the development license or even have the credentials to be able to make those changes.
That's right.
This is really one of the other things that it wasn't something that we needed to pull in because you already had that feature built into it.
That's great to know, yeah. A couple other tabs here, we'll just move on. So there's a place for external alarm connections in and quality stuff as well as a display if you want to show up a certain way in a given time. But that gives you the basics of what this analog status is about. If I look at other tabs real quickly, I'll just right-click on RTU and do a new child. That brings up our tag types. And so I can easily look in here and say, what do my analogs look like? So even rate of change alarms. Here's a cool one. That actually would look at the rate of change of an analog point. If it changes too fast, up or down, or even too slow, it will alarm you. So you'll know, oh wow, I turned this on, I did not see a rate of change like I thought I should have. So now we have an alarm. And those are built-in types of tags. Totalizer tags, counter tags, maybe you have a pulse meter of some sort. I can look at digital points very similarly, like here, and the same kinds of things coming in. Roster, that would have to do with our alarm notification. We won't look at that for a while. If I come on further from that, we have other kind of inputs and outputs. Some of those are very similar. Like here's a string I/O. Sometimes you need to have an ASCII text come in. Again, depending on the system, that become very important. We're seeing some things these days, by the way, with IIoT and the JSON driver and some others, and that might be a place where this could become important later on. But we're taking amends for that already, or looking forward to that. If I want to look at all of these things together, though, I can click on all of that and see all the tags together. So it really lets you have complete control and command. As you are creating your tag database, I can easily add them here, or I can take and export this tag database to an Excel spreadsheet. Do my copy and paste over there and import it in on the fly, as you mentioned a moment ago. I can take this at a whole nother RTU offline, synchronize those tags, while the system is running and is all of a sudden active to us.
And then how does that work with the change set too? Does it get counted that you could roll back after an
It
import?
does. It does. And so since we've kind of looked at a number of things on the tag database structure, why don't we close this down for a moment and let's take a look at our configuration settings.
All right.
So Robert, one of the things that I have been most thrilled about looking at VT SCADA, because I came from the outside world. I mean, you know my background. For roughly 7-ish years, I was a system integrator, doing water, wastewater work all over the place. And then I spent some time, I guess from 1997 until about 2014, as manufacturing side of things. And both RTUs, communications, power equipment, PLCs, all those kinds of things together. And it's only about 3 years ago that I came to VT SCADA. And one of the things when I learned more and more about the software package itself, the more excited I became about the configuration part of VT SCADA. You've mentioned that already about how we can do it all on the fly. It sounds kind of weird, say on the fly, it sounds kind of loosey-goosey. Really what it ought to say is we configure while the system is running. And the system is smart enough to take care of all those aspects together without missing a beat.
You're not having to go back and recompile something.
That's right. So let me give you an example of this. If I look back at my navigation up at the top, I've done this a couple of times here, but at the top here, looking on the, starting from on the right, we have the alarm page. We're going to look at that here shortly as well. Got a place for some sticky notes. That's just kind of, print screen, and then the sticky notes. That's a fun little addition. And then we have this one here with some gears. If I click on that gears, it says application configuration. And what comes up at this point, I'm going to make it full screen for us. What it comes up at this point is the ability on the left-hand side to look at a variety of different parts of the configuration. Let me go to the top left, and I will click on these tabs. This would be the properties of the application that I'm dealing with. So one of the things that's interesting is I back out just for a moment and look at my VT SCADA application manager here. I have the ability of running several applications all at the same time on my own server, my computer in this case, my laptop. I'm running this one called Water Industry Demo, but I could easily come down here and say start up one like Wichita Falls or City of Modesto, California, or ACE 2017. We ran this application at the AWWA conference in 2017 and run multiple applications at the same time. When I look at this screen, this is only changing the one application I'm looking at. So I could actually have a water application, a wastewater, a lift station, and a distribution, 4 independent applications on the same server, same VT SCADA, that are all configured differently. And here's how that might work. Under this display tab, I can actually come down here and change icons. I can change the way my window comes up. Does it automatically fit the screen? Do I have a fixed size? Those become things we're concerned about. In our world, talking about thin clients, though, I think that's a huge part, and that is we can define with a reusable size window, it automatically changes to whatever my display screen is. If I'm on a high performance screen, a low performance or low screen, or my iPhone, my ThinkPad, whatever, it all comes up as it would say on that display.
Yeah, that's pretty huge because on even a lot of our applications, if it's resolution dependent,
right?
It's if we've developed in this, 1920 by 1080, now we open it up in a different a different resolution. Is going to want to convert that entire,
right,
instead of just kind of manipulating it to adapt to that client.
That's right. Resolution was the word I was looking for. Thank you very much. So anyway, I come down from there, and you can see a variety of things I can modify and change and all of that, including title bars. And that becomes important, the way your customer wants to see these screens set up. And you guys have a great command of that because you meet with the customers and make sure that you know what their desires are, what their needs are. You incorporate that into the right solution for them moving forward. And then if you need to make a change later on, you can simply check a box and it automatically changes for you. That becomes very good. If I go across the other tiles here, here's one for alarms. Again, how do my alarms act? Do I want to have it flashed? I want to have different color schemes. I want to have it in certain formats. If I'm looking at my sound cards, my dial-out voice commands, or my SMS text, or my emails, how do those things work as well? How do I navigate between those pieces? Do I have alarm notes that you have to put in? If you acknowledge an alarm, I've got to put a note what I did to that. Again, that becomes user specific. I can check a box and then that becomes consistent throughout your application. If I want to have my alarm notification again for the dial out or the SMS text, do I want to do it on a priority 1 alarm only or priority 1 and 2, or don't do it at all? Those are all check boxes here. What kind of delays you want to put into all that? Again, it gives you really complete command of your alarm notification system. Same thing with your emails and the acknowledgments coming back in. Again, we'll look at that a little bit later on. Hey, this is one of the cool things though, and that is this Twilio account settings. So one of the difficulties people have these days when they're looking at putting in server farms, or maybe they're using a cloud based in Seattle to back it up, for example, or they have voice over IP, or maybe they're in an IT building where you don't have analog phone lines. What do you do then? Well, there is a service out there called Twilio. We found on the web, twilio.com, which allows us now, we can send an SMS text to Twilio. It will convert it to a dial-out voice modem that'll call somebody. They can enter the code to acknowledge the alarm, comes back through to Twilio, sends a SMS text back into VT SCADA, and it logs it in your alarm summary that it was acknowledged by the right person. And all that can be done automatically.
That's pretty cool.
So we keep up to date on those kinds of things all the time. There's a thing here also for historical data viewer. We haven't looked at the historian in the data viewer yet, but we will. And then finally under other, there's a place here where I can automatically deploy my local changes. Or I can say, you know what, I've got 2 servers, please don't do that. I'm gonna check the box, I press apply, and I can now put a comment in, do not deploy changes automatically. I may misspell, but it's close enough. I terribly misspelled, doesn't matter. There we go. And now that has been changed. Or I can always come back and say, I'm gonna check that box again. Yes, go ahead and deploy it. And there again, I can put a comment or not, and voila, it is now back to where it was. But all of these things become parts that matter for how you set up a system. Another thing is called the OEM layer. So here's where you guys have the ability of putting in lots of other functionality behind the scenes to make it easy. If I look back at my screen under advanced mode, I have now a lot of other parameters I can change. I can add parameters to this. I can make all kinds of changes. And by the way, these are ones that are application level. I can also go over here and check this box called hide OEM parameters, or uncheck the box. And now we have many other parameters that can be modified behind the scenes. Typically, these are not ones that an end user would use very often. In fact, it's usually when you're setting up a system to make it operate the way you want it to operate that these become very, very powerful. Our side of things is, how do we make sure that the developers, the application configuration people, have complete control of the application?
Yeah, you don't want to completely hide it, but you don't want it all out there.
That is correct.
That everybody's going to get in there and make those changes.
That is correct. Now, here's a place where you would want to have your roles and responsibilities clearly defined. Absolutely. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and check that box back just for the moment, since that's where it was. If I go down my list here, though, I can easily add a server. So in this case, I have 2 servers listed. One is Alan's PC, and one is some IP address. Let's just say I want to add another server, and let's just say it's going to be in Eric's office. So Eric's office server. Now, maybe he's not actually going to be configuring, polling the R2 user things, but he wants to be able to back up the historian. I press the plus button. He's now listed right here. If I press apply, and I'll just put in here a note of added Eric server. It is now listed in our system. I press OK. He is now 3rd on the list in our server. That's how easy that was. How do you go and grab a new I even spelled that wrong as well. Sorry about that. Eric's office severe. That's okay. If I were to go in now, Eric needs to bring in the latest application. He would come over to the VT SCADA application manager. He would press the plus button, and then he could go to advanced. He can click on next. And now I have some other options here. I'm going to use the one that says get from workstation. I press next. As long as Eric can see me on the network, he would now click on Allen-PC. When he clicks on next, here are all the VT SCADA applications I have. He can choose the right one. He presses OK. It pulls the application over and starts it up automatically, and now his server becomes redundant.
Yes, I don't have to do a backup. I don't have to figure out all these components that need to be transferred over.
That's correct.
It's just handled seamlessly.
It's all done seamlessly and automatically. Exactly right. So really, really powerful from that standpoint. There's another part of this server setup I think is important. Let's look at the advanced mode. One of the things that happens is you'll have multiple servers that are responsible for multiple activities within a system. A small system is not that way. You may have one PC doing everything, or maybe even the backup doing everything as well. And if the primary fails, the secondary picks up. Life is fine. But in larger systems, now you have certain machines doing certain functions. And in that case, I'm going to look at this server list. I'm going to right click and say to add specific or server specific lists. And now here's just a variety of the things that it might want to do. So for example, you might say, well, the Modicon driver is going to be restricted to a certain server. Or maybe I want to say my alarm historian is going to be in a certain place. I can now have complete control over where those things are being done. If I have a question as to how that works, I'll simply press the F1 key. Up comes my, whoops, there's an example of where, let me close that thing down. I'll press the F1 key, and now here is my help menu on my client server reference. If I still have a question, let's just say I'm not an IT guy and I have some questions, I'm probably going to pick up the phone and call 855 VT SCADA, and Doug or Jen will help walk me through this. Or they can get online and help. Perhaps this is where the IT folks call in as well. And now we have a system architecture conversation to make sure that what we're doing really lines up with the goals of that municipality. So that becomes very, very powerful. So that's a part of this server lists. Here's the same server security we looked at a moment ago, the application security rather. Here is what we were talking about, this change set file. What in the world's a change set file? Well, as you mentioned before, and we know this, anybody that's dealt with SCADA packages know how difficult it is to back things up. First of all, it's really important that we back things up, because if something's going to happen wrong, it's going to happen wrong for sure.
I make multiple backups. The first thing I do when I log in, make a backup before I make any change.
Right.
And then even throughout the whole time, if it's a major change, I'm making another backup.
Me too.
And having to constantly do that and copy it
Yeah.
to a different folder. But that's a manual thing that I'm having to do.
That's right.
In a lot of the packages.
And sometimes I'll even have a separate hard drive or a thumb drive. I'm putting that on, so I want to make sure it's not getting mixed up. Then which one did I have in there last? Exactly right. Well, here's what we would say and do is this. We have different options here, of course, but the option here for create a standard change set file, this lets me take this application that I'm running right now, this water online demo. I can create a backup. I'm going to come over here and create one right now. Let me show you how easy this is. Create. And we're going to, since Eric is our guy here, Eric, here's your folder here. So Eric's backup, just for fun. And I press OK. And now it's going to start operating. And we're going to see it create. It's going to take a little bit longer. It's about 1,200 tags that I'm running right now, with a lot of history attached to it as well. It's taking all of these changes I've been making and making those copies as well. That is one of the coolest parts of this whole change set and version control.
So is it going to pull in the historical information too?
It is not going to take the historian. In this case, it is only the application.
But it's going to take the historian configuration.
That is correct. The configuration is there. If you want the historian, there's simply another folder that all that can be pulled apart as well. Okay? So in this case, let me just look at Eric's backup. I can right-click and look at the properties of that, and you can see the size of that application. So in this case, it is only about, about 300 megabytes large. That is certainly big enough to put on an FTP site, to email to somebody, to put on a thumb drive, put in a drawer somewhere. And that is a complete application backed up. That's how easily that can be done. But it goes further than that. We have the ability of making a limit change set history from some time period. You can say, the last time we backed this up was September the 1st. So I just want to have the changes since then. Or perhaps I say, I want to make a revision file. And now whenever I make a new revision, it only picks up those changes I made since last time. What that lets someone do is now say, I have this application running, and I'm back at my office now, and they called and said, hey, would you mind adding this and this and this to it? Sure, no problem. I can now make those changes. I can now do a change set of just those changes, send it to them. They click on it. It incorporates those changes while it's running on the fly, and it's running.
And that's whether you've added tags, added screens, any of that configuration.
Any of that.
Where with a lot of packages, you're having to export the displays.
That's right.
Export the tags, kind of pull these in as separate pieces.
That's correct.
Just to kind of put it back together from the development that you had made. And even in a lot of those, you're still having to export and then clean that file up to send over to be imported.
That's correct. That's correct. And all
So
that's
it's
done
pretty impressive.
automatic.
But the change set file is definitely something that you don't see
Yeah.
in really any other package
That's right.
that we use.
There's another option here in the middle, and you're going to understand this here more in just a moment. It's called a snapshot. A snapshot will take the application today without all the history of all the changes. That becomes important to where you're working on a project, you're going through factory tests, field tests, making other kind of changes. When you're finally at the point where this is what we want, I can now create a snapshot, and all of those other changes are kind of lost away. They're kind of ignored, if you will. So now we have a clean copy from today. Here is the copy to move
It's
forward.
like a roll-up.
Exactly right. That's right. So if I look back at this whole thing for creating a change set, let me go down to the bottom of this area and say version log. The version log tells me a couple different things. It says, okay, here are the workstation names that have ever had my application on it. In this case, it's one that we've been using as a demo for quite a while. You can see that my color is in black. It means that I am the most recent version of this, which, duh, that's what I'm here looking at today. But if I look down below that, you can see every change I've been making. So today is November the 21st. These are the changes I've been making today while we've been talking. What really is cool is I can do show all at the bottom, and now I have a roll-up of every change I've ever made to this application, all the way back, in this case, to April the 20th, 2016, 2.5 years ago. Every change. So when I've done a presentation, I've done a trade show, I've done a demo, then I'm showing all of these changes all the way through. Now, I really have complete command at this point of my application. Let's go back and look at that one more time and say this. If I look at what I've done today, I have changed my, let's see, where are we? I need to go back to the top, don't I? Let me go to the top of this. All right, and we can say that from today, I've changed all kinds of security pieces. I've modified some tags. I've changed some properties. I've also modified my server list when we added Eric's server, or Severe, or whatever we call that thing. And so when we added all that, all those changes have been made. Let me do something a little bit more fun. I'm going to click back on this. Let's just go to this Idea Studio, just so you can see something. I'm going to grab a gauge in this case. We'll grab this gauge. It's one of my favorites. I'll put it on the screen. I'm going to make it my size that I want it to look like. And by the way, you can see on the top left, it is live on the screen right now. I'm going to go ahead and attach it to a tag. We'll say link it to, let's go with a well level. I always like well levels. Zone 1. We'll go with tank. And where's my level? There's a level. And oops, didn't mean to click. We'll do a single click. Press select. It is now going to show the well level. I now close it down. And if I go back to that version control, what you'll see is, if I refresh it, I now have something that actually logs something in. If I right click on that and say show version details, it shows me here something in green means I added something. Well, we know we added a gauge. We just watched it. Yellow means I took something away. An orange or red mean there were some conflicting parameters attached to that. Reason we need orange and red is because we actually support multi-development on the same screens, same application at the same time. It means that you could be here, VPN in, making some changes. I could be on site making some changes. Eric could also be on a different server at the same facility making some changes. As long as there are no conflicts, it takes them all and logs them accordingly by time and date stamps. If, however, we do something that conflicts, it's going to alert us and let us know that answer.
Yeah, that's a nice feature there.
It's pretty cool. So I'm going to take this. Let me minimize this just so we can see it a little bit better. All right, I'm going to move that out of the way. Now at this point, I could actually right click and say, I want to reverse that version change. Whatever version's over here, whatever that change was, I can reverse it. Or let's say I had something down here a little further below. I want to merge this version into my current version. Or let's say, you know what, I want to take all this stuff here where I modified my security thing, and I want to right click and say, I'm going to reverse that whole range. So click on that, and then go all the way down to the last one, like here, and I'm going to right click again and say, reverse that version end. And now all of a sudden it's going to take all of that and it's going to give me the option of reversing all those changes. We're not going to do that. What I will say is, let's take this one up here and right click. Now let's just reverse that change. Take that, I'll press apply, and in this case it's going to be remove the gauge. Is that GAU, GUA is one of those. We press OK, and lo and behold, that is gone.
Wow.
And what's cool is it actually made a change. You said, look, here's the change I just made. I removed the gauge.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. That's a pretty cool feature on that.
Yeah, as far as I know, we're the only ones doing something along those lines. And what's really cool is when I make that change, now that change is not only served up and deployed either automatically or manually to all the other servers, but my log of changes is also modified. So I could be on a different machine later on and reverse that change back if I wanted to.
How long has the change set been part of VT SCADA?
At least 10 years that I'm aware of. And my understanding is that what was happening in those days was we had some of our engineering folks were now deploying some of those projects, some of those that were really high profile, like airports and those kinds of systems. And they looked at the developers and said, hey, wait a second, I can't reverse what I just did.
So it stemmed from a need that they
Exactly,
had.
yeah. They said, we've been doing it forever as we developed the product. Oh, let's make that part of this.
That's kind of where a lot of our features had came from. You do some kind of factory test, and then the engineer has their own way of wanting it.
Right.
Then you actually get to the customer and they've got something. So instead of sitting there in development and having to make all these changes that are static changes,
Right.
It was how can we make some of these more dynamic, so on the fly, if a customer wants something different, we can kind of change it then. So that's where a lot of our features have came out of. And then at the same time, it was making it easier for us, but it does make it dynamic for the customer at the same time. So
That's
they don't
right.
have to call us and say, hey, we need to pay you to come back in, go into development, take the time to change this. It's kind of empowering them. So even though it looks, a lot of these are features for them,
Right.
it benefits us at the same time.
So let me
too.
tell you where I really think it comes into play. Because as an integrator, like you guys are today, what happens a lot of times is you're called on site to come do something. So let's just say your system has been running now for 3 months, we'll say, running beautifully. You show up on site and they have this list of things they want you to do. Great. So on Tuesday morning, I begin to make the changes. And Wednesday, it's all looking good. By Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, I think we're ready. I'm on a development server, so to speak, right? I'm letting it run, and it's still synchronizing everything behind the scenes, but it's running my new application, all those changes. And now I come into Thursday, it's run all night long. Life is grand. I'm thinking about the weekend coming up, and so Thursday afternoon, I make sure the plant manager is all thrilled with it. I deploy out to everybody. Everybody gets accustomed to it. It's like, woohoo, I'm heading home. So you drive home, you're 3 hours away, come in on Friday, life is still good. You call them, do it, still working? Yes, still working, great. You leave at noon, you grab the family, you're heading to Gatlinburg for the weekend, You can go have fun.
I've been there.
Oh, yeah. Saturday morning comes along, you get a call from the plant manager. It broke. Something ain't right. You don't know what it is, but it's not working the way it ought to. And the operator on the weekend found the problem. What do? Well, in the old days, you'd pack up the family, drive back here, let them off, drive to the site, or maybe you leave your family there to have fun while you drive
Mine's
back.
been actually while I'm driving, trying to talk to the operator and the kids are screaming.
Gotcha. Yeah, exactly, exactly. In this case, what I would do is say, you know what, my instructions to the operator, or maybe the administrator, the IT guy, whoever it may be, can now come use that tool, reverse all the, or actually switch to that version that it was like on Monday before you started messing with things, and all of a sudden it's back like it was on Monday. You can now enjoy the rest of your weekend. You come back on Monday, you can go to the site and now start bringing those changes in little by little by little till you find the problem. So now your customer has the best of all worlds. Yours does too, and your family does as well.
Yeah, they haven't wiped out the changes.
That's right.
You can still go back and methodically go through it like you're saying.
That is correct.
They're not just like restoring it back up and blowing that
Exactly right. That's right. So your week is not lost. That is correct. That's one of the cool things for me. A few more things on this screen, and then we'll move on to something else. But I want to look real quickly on this export or sync tags. We did this a moment ago. We were talking about in our tag database. If I right click or click on that rather, I can actually take my tag database, send it over to an Excel file. It comes up with various worksheets, folders, if you will, really are worksheets. You can modify those, and then on the fly while you're running, synchronize that back together simply by pressing the sync. One of the powerful pieces that we do is Trihedral engineering, or VT SCADA, is if you took, let's say, a competitor's tag database, if you could take, you're going to convert from it to VT SCADA, you can take that tag database, send it to us in a CSV file format. We will take it, import it, massage it to make it where it's 100% a VT SCADA tag database. We send it back to you, you now plug it into your system, and you at least have the tag database built. That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
When we look at our tags, here's another cool thing too, is sometimes the way a tag was built, we'll just say 10 years ago, and named, was not the name you want to use today. Maybe you didn't have the right train, now you have a train 1 and train 2.
It didn't follow a standard.
Exactly.
Other integrators came in and added something not following a standard.
That's right, that's right. So when we have a tag name, we actually have a unique ID attached to that our historian uses. Now that unique ID is yay long, right? It's very, very long, very complex, but our historian keeps up with all of that. What that means is you can now, on the fly, change the name of a tag without losing any of its history or any of its configurations. It automatically transfers over, so it's contiguous throughout the entire application.
Now, if I did have a customer that was upgrading from some other package and wanted to go with VT SCADA, they
Right.
have historical data.
Yes,
They've got the tag database, like you're
Right.
saying, and they fall into that same situation that you're saying where they want to change the tag name,
yep.
and y'all can handle the conversion and still marry that up with the historical data that you can convert.
That is correct. And so one of the tools built into VT SCADA is actually being able to take a historian, external historian, a SQL type historian, and bring those files in and populate in the rear, of course, our historian as well. And so you can take all that and then even change the tag names after that, and it takes it all the way through. Those tools are available today. An integrator can do it, we can do it, an end user can even do it if they have a little bit of an expertise attached to them. So we actually encourage that. There's no reason to make a change and lose all the data, lose all the history. Those are important parts for municipality. So you want to keep those things together. So that right there is just the quick and dirty, if you will, around this configuration settings of VT SCADA. But I think we should take something, and we were talking about the historian a bit. Why don't we take this and look at what the historian does for us as our next topic?
All right.
So Robert, when we look at the historian and what the historian does for you and is built in particular, I want to take a look at this screen right here, which is the one that I like for a default. It's the water distribution system. Typically, we're used to seeing a graphic screen with an alarm banner across the bottom or some location, followed by or along with a graphical trend somewhere inside there as well. And the way it's been done for years is that when you create the system, or you configure the system, you go ahead and configure what the graphic is going to look like with the trending. You choose the pins, you choose the colors, all those defaults. And while that's a good way to used to do it, let me show you the power of having an internal built-in historian. So using my mouse, just moving across the screen, if I were to look at this tank number 3, for example, I hover over that percentage, it's going to tell me the tag name, and it's the level of tank 3. If I click on that point, up comes the trend. That's all I had to do to create me a new trend.
Without having to add any scripting?
No scripting, not whatsoever. None at all. And within this right here, I'm looking at, in this case, a 2-hour window. I could drop that down and say, give me the last 6 hours. You can see where we began right here. I can say, no, I want to look at the last 10 minutes. And there it is there as well. So we'll just look at an hour. That's a good number right here. And then I can add some more pins to it. So I could, I guess, click on this little tag right here and now go choose some points. Or better yet, let me just come over here and click on a couple of points like this tank and this tank. Now all of a sudden we have 3 tank levels.
That's a lot more powerful
Absolutely.
than having to go search for it, because it's right there on the screen.
That's right, because I wouldn't know where to go search.
Yeah.
Right. And so then I can take and have complete control of this. For example, I can use my little hot buttons at the top and say, click on this, and now it separates those trends out. Or I can put them back together. I can easily look at these pluses and minuses and search in and out, x-axis or y-axis. In particular, what I want you to see is across the bottom here, as I move across the screen, not only am I getting the actual value, notice it's showing a minimum and a maximum and an average. And that would be of the time period selected up here. So that would be of 1 hour. If I were to change this and say, I want to see that average for the last 2 hours, we see those numbers change. Or perhaps the last 6 hours. Or what about if you said for the last day? Would that now give us the daily trend, maximums, minimums, and averages? All of a sudden that analysis is being done for you. So really it's about analysis more than anything else.
Now what if you're looking at that trend, you've got all your pins on there, can you export that data out? I'm
glad you asked that question. So yeah, let me zoom back in just for a second. Go to the last 2 hours. I like that number. If I want to export this or print it, I can simply click on the print button right here. It'll print it out just like it shows. Or if I click on the diskette, which the new people don't know what a diskette is, we old guys do. I'm going to click on that diskette, and I can now have a data export. If I click on the next button, I now have 4 different formats that I can choose to export that. So a CSV file, Excel spreadsheet, some ODBC compliant database. So sometimes they'll take this and want to put it into a maintenance package, for example, to now be able to manipulate work orders based upon these tank levels, or some other analysis tool they want to use.
Well, a lot of times I'm getting the customers calling, they've had a membrane system put in, or some other vendor that's needing to do a study and wants to get that data out of there. So they don't want to pay us to come in and do some special report and create something custom. They just say, hey, I got this. It's just for a month or two. We need to provide this raw data to them.
Gotcha. And so what you can do in that case is, let me just show you, if we look back at our time span up here, I can actually go back as long as 5 years, just directly on this screen. So let me just go back, we'll just say to the last 60 days. Now, granted, this has only been on for a few times and lunch and learns and trade shows and whatever, but you get the idea that I now have all of this data. I can simply export that and say, here's your data for the last 60 days. Let me do something else, because sometimes they'll say I want to have something else attached to it, just to go back to the last 2 hours. And let me click on a digital point like this pump. If I click on that pump, I now have a digital point mixed in with the analogs. We'll add 2 more pumps to it. And by the way, we're now looking at 2-hour window, all the ons and offs. Look at the minimum, maximum, of course, it's going to be 0 and 1 because it's on and off. But under the average, that would be the amount of time it's been on, right? And then if I look a little further on, the number of starts as well as the on time. So if you have a pump that it turns on and that is the true on, you now have a runtime. And so somebody says, well, I'm curious about my daily runtime. Well, okay, let's just look at the last day. And now I have a daily runtime that quick. I can export that out into some package that wants to take a look at those pieces.
These are perfect for the RTUs because we're typically doing the trends where you've got the run status and they're wanting to see, whether if it's a lift station, seeing the level come down.
Right.
So being able to see the run status, a lot of times we're having to create those custom trends to put on there. So
sure. One of the things we were looking at some of these other buttons, let me just go to the last 60 days again. And let's just look at this point right here. I'll click on the plus button up here, hover over that area, zoom in, and now we're getting data from, in this case, October the 4th. So having complete control over your historian by sliding scales is very easily done, or I can put it back into normal mode here, and we're back into the last 8 hours. Actually, this is the last 8 hours. Let me throw a couple more things for you, and that's raw data coming across. Let me go make the last two. Raw data coming across. I can look at this thing called a grid tab. If I click on the grid, now I have the ability of looking at a time and date stamp along with my various tags here, as well as I can say, give me the averages every, we'll just say 10 minutes. And now all of a sudden I've taken that analysis and compressed it to 10 minutes. So this is doing analysis on the fly as the system is running. Again, another advantage of having built-in historian to the system. I can still take this information, I can still export that into the same format as you had before, and it will look exactly the same way. Let me take one more thing about this, and it would be called what we call operator notes. So if a system is running, an operator typically is keeping a notepad beside the computer, and they're writing all kinds of notes in it. The problem is searching those notes later, or even keeping consistent notes. So for example, what I can do, let's just say we look at this, and again, we've been going here for a few hours. Let's just say I want to put a note right here. Well, I'm going to click on the kind of notebook I want to have. I can have numerous notebooks, operator notebooks, individual notebooks, equipment notebooks, all different ones.
And you're creating these notebooks yourself? They're not built in. You can add more.
That is correct. You can add more notebooks even on the fly. Correct. So now I can say I'm just going to add a system note, and we're going to put that system note right here. So I click on the little note hotbox. I'm going to come into this point here. I'll click the button, and I'm going to add on here, let's just say pump 1 restarted due to a, we'll just say a high level malfunction, we'll just say. Again, I don't know what it may be. But sometimes I've written this in here automatically. We could actually have a quick note. We can develop our own library of quick notes. You know, operators don't like to type a lot. They may want to make misspellings or whatever. So you give them a notebook list, and they can choose the note to put in there. Maybe they could type in pump 1, and then there's another area after that, and they can modify that as well.
Now, is there an easy way? You know, you've got 30 days. You don't want to go, you know, you don't know where that note is until you drill down and happen to see it. Is there a way to just see those notes pretty quick?
There is. Let me show you this. So I'm going to press OK, and now we see on the screen we actually have a acknowledgement, a location in my historian file in the audit trail side, so you can't modify this. So be careful what you write about, people. don't mess that up. If I click on that, here's my note. I can add a comment to it, add another part of a thread. So we'll just say George will investigate. George is always good at doing that kind of thing. So we'll type that in, and we press OK. And now it's part of that note. So here's what you're kind of getting at is I can go to my notebook area, and I can look at any of my notes here, and I can type in something like pump 1. And now it searches in every instance of pump 1 throughout the entire system is all showing up right here. Even if it's a part of a thread, it shows that as well, all the way through. If for some reason you didn't have this up and going, we actually have a spot down here where you can go to the alarms, reports, trends, and notes, and those are automatic folders that are created. When you install BT-SCADA for the first time, start a new application, these folders come automatically because those are the ones you want to use for analysis later on. Again, instantly intuitive, that's our goal, right? So let me show you one more thing about this. Let me go back to my plot here. And let's just say we want to save this trend. Let's just say we've put a temporary flow meter in, or a temporary pump, we'll say, and we're trying to watch these tank levels, see if they're going to equalize correctly or not. And I'm going to watch this for the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to click on this little tag button. We looked at this a moment ago, and it can be very difficult or cumbersome to go try to find new tags, even though you can sort by names and areas and all of that. What I want to show you is we can save this group. Robert, let's just say this is Robert's trend group, and you want to watch this trend for the next 2 weeks. And we'll just say until, I don't know, we'll just say December 14th, we'll say. Press OK. And now what you'll notice is inside of my trend areas, I now have your trend group. So if I were to click on this level here, for example, I click on that, go down to your trend group, and voila, there it is. Now, while we're on this, let me just do a quick diversion just for a moment, because the question is, how do I see that if I'm at home or from another computer or from my tablet or something? Well, let me just show you. If I were to click on this area here, go to my application manager, I know it's a bit of a sidestep for just a moment to talk about thin clients, but if I look at this web thing, this world rather, I now have my thin client set up. This is how easy thin clients are. Again, we're going to think about this in a moment. The concept is I'm out at a station with my iPad, and I want to be able to see data and then even add a trend. So I can click on this right here for my security. We got to have security. Make sure IT is satisfied with security. SSLs, VPNs, be sure you consult properly. Then we have our server setups. So in this case, I've got 3 different ones. We could easily add in their Eric server like we had a moment ago. Let's just say we're going to use Allen-PC. I can modify some parameters, the port number and those kind of things. Again, security is utmost. Finally, what we call a realm. In the realm area, I can create another one as well. So let's just create one. Let's add one. And we're going to call it Eric's computer. Let's just say we're going to be connecting into Eric's computer for this realm. I press OK. And then when I go to add my application, I'm going to choose that water industry demo. That's what I'm running right now. And I press OK, I press apply, and all of a sudden a URL shows up. So my VIC is a VT SCADA Internet Client. It is not Java, it's JavaScript. So it is protected, it's very secure. So we can look at the URL. It's the PC name, :80, that's the port number, with a slash, followed by the server name, in this case Eric's, the realm name, excuse me, followed by the application name, which in this case is Water Industry Demo. If I test this, it's now going to let me sign in as something else, like demo, for example. And voila, we are in, and now we're seeing that application. And we're seeing, in this case, the same one. And if I were to look at this application running as a thin client, I could now click on that same tank level. I could now actually see my December 14th, the one we just said a moment ago. Or maybe want to create a new one. Let's go ahead and say, you know what, let's forget that. Let's just go ahead and just create one, and we'll make it a little bit different. And in this case, I'm going to save this one as, we'll say this group is Alan's group, just to give it something different. And then when I press OK, what we'll see is not only is it available on my thin client, as it is, I can also look back at my official application running on this server, and lo and behold, it is listed already right here. All that is done seamless without any integration from my side at all. It's just put in there what I want.
Yeah, that's really impressive. Now, when you're talking about the VIC and things like that, what's the benefit of the VIC over, say, a RDP? I know that at VT SCADA last year, they talked about, if you are using something that's remote, right, the bandwidth and how the screens actually update, yep, instead of it refreshing the entire screen, and what, kind of basically the benefits that you get out of that over using like an RDP.
Exactly. Yeah, so one of the things that we do within that environment, let me go back to where we were just a second ago, in fact, like right here. If we're looking at this, we have our Anywhere client. Anywhere client is an HTML5. And you're exactly right, I'm going to sign in as Allen here. The only data we send back and forth is data that's changed. So for example, looking at this right here, only the data like this tank level that's changing. That's all that I'm sending back and forth. So we are conserving bandwidth. We're making it very probable that we're going to have good throughput, no matter how many users are going to be online here. Another along those lines would be, if you're really concerned with data, and now you're looking at graphics here, we have this mobile internet client. A mobile internet client allows me now to be able to, I'll do demo, It allows me now to be set up where I'm looking at tabular data. So all the graphics aren't coming through. So in this case, the only thing updating are those analog points where they're changing already. If I do have better data at some point, I can easily click on this little computer screen, and now we have the graphic.
And you're not no one's having to go in and create that view.
Nobody's creating that view. That is correct.
We've, tried looking at creating these different views, and that we call it a lean view. So it is something that, they just need the values that are on the screen.
Right.
They're not there operating the plant, needing to know which pipe is the whole process of it.
Right.
They already know that. They're just looking to get some values off of that. So we've had to create that custom, but that's pretty impressive that it's,
Well, again, that's just from the get-go. They wanted to make sure that we were meeting the needs of the municipalities.
Now, in all these different features, as you're going through, it just seems like a lot of these are, from the years that I've been doing, SCADA systems, you kind of have, it's almost like a note of wish list of all these things that you wish that it had.
Yeah.
And it seems like y'all have gone in and created these. How does the process of you guys taking these things and put them in? Do y'all constantly have a forum that people are posting things, or how is this whole development process to where you get these things?
Yeah, it is kind of cool. So on Monday mornings at 7:30, we have a development meeting, and they'll go through not the whole list of 700 or whatever things that we want to get done. They'll look at the most common things, the things that have bubbled up to the top and that people are working on specifically. Many of those are long-term roadmap ideas and or developments. A number of those would be bug fixes as well throughout the time. But a whole host of those, probably, I'm just going to guess, maybe 60%, are actually feedback from customers saying, I sure wish it could do whatever. So at VT SCADA Fest, in the developer's den, they're taking notes of those kind of things. But the other thing could be, you could say, hey, Alan, it'd be great if it could do so-and-so. I will take that and I'll put that into our wish list repository at the factory. And then we have a guy who looks at those things, looks at frequency of those things occurring. We have 10 people or 10 customers asking for the same thing. Maybe that's bubbled up the list a bit. Or maybe it's our tech support line. You've called Doug or Jennifer, and they're saying, hey, I'm seeing the same question come into play, or I'm having to do the same expressions. Why don't we make that a default piece? And then that becomes part of our development as well. So we look at all those things together. We look at how many customers it affects. We look at the benefits across the board. And we will also look at how easy it is to implement, and is it something that is going to be taken care of in a future release? If it is, we may hold off. Or sometimes we'll say, wow, let's go ahead and take that then and make it a quicker release, because it is more important along those lines. And that's a great thing you ask. We really like to have the voice of the customer coming in personally. And it goes through our salespeople, our development folks, our engineers. You can even call the president or email the president if you wanted to, and that would now become a part of his wish list to take him to the development team.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So with that being said, I've got a couple things running. Let me just show you one more aspect of this VT SCADA Internet client. I think it's very unique as well, and that is, and you made the comment, we've installed nothing at this point on any remote device. I have this internet client monitor. And by the way, all of these at the top are things that are default. We're not going to get into those today. Things like a source debugger, trace viewers, and those kinds of things. If you're having difficulty, the person doing the development can utilize those tools and really test out their system. But if I run this by pressing that green button, what you'll see is I have 3 different installations coming in, 3 different remote clients coming in. It tells you who those customers are, what page they're on, how long they've been connected into the system, all those kinds of things, the IP addresses, if it's relevant, all those things come in automatically as part of the administration part of VT SCADA. We look at that kind of thing coming in. We also have SNMP protocol built in, so we're looking at battery voltage, we're looking at CPU loading, we're looking at RAM availability, hard drive space. All those things are also part of default VT SCADA configurations, and so we can look at that data at any time.
Now, could I shadow those sessions the clients are looking at in any way.
What do you mean by shadow?
So typically on an RDP session,
Yep.
if a client comes in, says they're having this issue on a screen,
Okay.
they can't do this. Well, typically, I could pull it up on, say, the console session, trying to run something mimicking theirs, and I don't see that same issue.
Right.
So a lot of times I'll go in and shadow their, and maybe they're just, they're not logged in, or, they're clicking on the wrong button.
Right.
So it does help sometimes being able to actually view that session.
Right.
I didn't know if that's a capability.
It is a capability, yes. And that's where some of these other functionalities up here would come into play. I haven't done that personally, but my understanding is that is a part that does happen automatically, and it can be done. So from a developer standpoint and debugging standpoint, it is done quite often. Exactly. Good. Let me show you one more part about this whole historical data viewer, and it looks at it from the standpoint of reports. So if I look at the bottom here, and I go just to this tile, the list view, and look at that folder, alarms, reports list, I come up to reports. So while these are not exhaustive reports, they are very relevant reports. Here are a list of 13 different kinds of reports that are default built into the system. And you can apply any kind of tags or points to these reports. So for example, an analog summary report, and you would choose those points and now have it write automatically. Here's one for a daily total report. This would define itself looking at types of tags called logger tags. Can you modify that and look at different kinds of tags? Absolutely. You have the freedom for making it look like you want it to look. How about this one right here? I just learned about this one about 2 months ago, and that would be a pump discrepancy report. In this case, looking at pump status type tags, and what it would do is say, wow, typically this pump is running, we'll just say 2.5 hours a day. And you look at a pump discrepancy report, and it says, you know what, it's been running 2.5 hours a day consistently. All of a sudden it ran 8 hours. Why? It's going to do a report for you that says, take a look at this pump because it's not doing right. Maybe you have volts and amps and those kind of things around it. Perhaps you have a pump temperature. Maybe it's a VFD and something is not happening quite right. Now you can have some discrepancy reports automatically generated based upon the historian built in. If I look back again at a couple other reports, I will say oftentimes people will use this hourly report, or most importantly probably is this daily total report. They'll use that one, and they'll now go and check and use any of these tags. They'll add tags to it, whichever ones they want to take, choose from this side, push it over to this side. And then that's, by the way, that's step number 1. Then you have step number 2. And then you have step number 3, the reporting period. Maybe I give it a preset time and date you want to go from, or preset times rather. Or maybe I just say, look at a calendar date or some other period of time. And then you click on that. How many records you want to look at? Maybe you want to have calendar days and look at the last 7 days. Granted, if you saw that selection here, here's the previous 7 days. But at any rate, and then the number 5 thing is, what's your report destination? Do you want to have an Excel file? Do you want it to be on the screen somewhere, a screen display? Do you want to print it? Which probably not as much anymore, but sometimes you do. Most of the time I would say you're going to have probably an Excel file. Click on that one, and then if I had the email set up, it would also, I could click on email report and choose the person it goes to. And then finally, what would be kind of report options that might show up? If I just want to see what this might look like, I can easily, we'll go to a screen display. Well, no, leave it like that's fine. And press run. Well, I guess I do could do something a little different. Hang on. Here we'll go to a screen display. And now run report. And I can test what it's going to look like. Voila, my spreadsheet is up. And that's what it might look like, being tag names, the date, the timestamp, what the names are. If those things were filled in, obviously if we had a true report, we would see these things come through in that manner. So a lot of folks, what they'll do is they'll use a report like this, and then have it go to a formatted Excel spreadsheet that now puts into a report format that a manager wants to see. Perhaps the deputy director wants to see a report once a month of various assets. Or maybe there's even an asset manager who wants to see certain pieces. And that becomes an automatically generated report, sent to the right place, emailed, printed, stored, whatever. It becomes very simple and easy. You can even append to those files. So actually some customers I know will take that pump report and every day they'll just add a new row to it, add a new row. So at the end of the month, they now have a 30-day running total that is just easily accessible to them.
Now on the pump discrepancy
Yes.
report, can any of that data get back onto the screen? Any of the outputs that it's showing, can you actually display that on a runtime screen?
Let me press the F1 key and we'll see a variety of things here, including what kind of report formats. And if you look at that discrepancy report in particular, did I go the wrong, I hit the wrong one, sorry about that. Create reports and report formats. Where are we here? The report type is described. And so the one you're talking about in particular is this pump discrepancy. All of these are actually looking at, again, a tag and a pump status stuff around that tag. Any of those parts can be pulled out and shown as a tag name, as a graphical display of some sort, even trended if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, because we have actually been trying on our pump pop-ups. So we have runtimes,
Yep.
we have cycles. So in addition to just having those values on there, a lot of times that doesn't really mean much to the operator if the pump has just ran 6 hours or
Right.
had 10 cycles. And we traditionally put in yesterday totals.
Okay.
So if, say, your pump average is 12 hours for a day,
Right.
I'm at noon, and it says I'm at 6 hours, I may think, hey, that's fine, because it's just kind of it's going to average out, and throughout the 24 hours, I'm halfway through, I'm going to get the 12 hours.
Yeah.
But what if all that happened between midnight and noon?
Gotcha.
I've actually, it's been running half the time.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is use the average per the hour to try to figure out, am I actually under or over currently? So what we're taking is, instead of looking at the day as a whole, because you would catch that at the end of the day,
Right.
but you wouldn't catch that real time right now in the way that we had traditionally been doing it, and the way you see most SCADA systems being done, where it's just a current runtime and a previous day runtime.
Right.
So in addition to that, we started querying and say, hey, what's the average at the exact time you open up the pop-up
Sure.
for the past 30 days? So immediately you would see, hey, you should be at 12 hours.
Right.
You did hit your 12 hours, even though it was the average for the day. That 12 hours happened by noon. So I was trying to think of how we could use this discrepancy report to kind of pull information back
Right.
in.
So as a sales guy, the answer is always yes. However,
So maybe that's a new
No, no.
feature.
Well, no,
Maybe we
yeah,
need to get-
there you go. But in truthfulness, what I would do there is say, okay, I know that all these are calculations already through. So they're doing the calculation, the average, and all those kind of things already. So the data is there. There's an expression already built that's being referenced. So the question is, how do I grab that reference? I don't know that answer for that part. So I'd call 855 BT SCADA. Hey, Doug or Jen, help me out. How would I do this? And what's really cool is sometimes they'll say, oh, I did that already. Let me show you how to do that. Or they may say, I don't know yet either, but I know it's there. Let me go find it. And they'll go find it and email you the answer or call you back with the answer. Maybe they got to go down and talk to the development guys and say, you know what, here's a great idea. How do we add that in? But my guess is, since the data is already there and the calculations are already being done, you have access to those calculations. I just don't know what the call name is to get that done. But the answer is yeah. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I've talked to Pat before, and there's been things that he's actually created, and they just immediately share it with you.
Yeah, exactly. We have no secrets. We don't sell features like that. It's just all included in the product. There's no reason for us to hold back something. Our goal is to get everybody using everything as best they can using VT SCADA. So that's great. Hey, let me show you one more quick thing though before we move this little topic. And I do want to show you the alarm notification here in just a moment. But while I'm looking at this with my reports, there was another thing I saw there I thought was really pretty cool, and that would be as it had to do with reports and alarms. Let me just click on the alarms real quickly, not to go through all of that real quickly, but I will say within these alarms that might be coming in, for example, as a history, and we can now sort on a history, so use this filter tag up here. And I can now let it look at either time spaces, time spans, areas, those kinds of things. And that data can also be printed out and or exported via Excel as well. But you said something a moment ago that I thought was very powerful, and I think we need to take a quick glance at it. And it had to do with not caring how long something ran today, for example. So I want to show you something that I think is very powerful right here under our navigation and our Slippy maps and templates. So if we can do that, I think it'll lend itself also to that idea about how long something ran today. So what I'm looking at here, Robert, is an implementation of a pumping station. And then we have HOA switches. I could look up here at various tabs and say a summary. I can look at statistics as well and faults and all those kinds of things, which are all great and wonderful. Well, the map of where that lift station is located is pretty cool as well. And if I click on Show All Sites, it actually shows all the sites I have in an area. This happens to be in Southern California where we were last week doing a presentation for a particular city. But you can see in this area here are all the sites they have in that area around Carlsbad. Let me close that down for a second and show you what that really means. So if I go back to this area here, I'm showing a map, and this map is actually of the U.S. It is done with Slippy Maps. It is an open mapping software, kind of like a Google Maps would be. And so if I just want to come into where we are today in the Atlanta area, I can zoom in as close as I want to zoom in. Now, granted, we're connected to the internet right now. Many municipalities will not have access to the internet. They don't want to have access to the internet. They're concerned about that, and for good reason. Well, what happens is when I do have access to the internet, I can zoom in, like to Norcross, for example. I can get to whatever level of granularity I want to get to. These maps are now cached inside my application. So if I disconnect my Ethernet cable, turn off the Wi-Fi, these maps are now available to me, okay? So that's good to know. Now let me take this, and we'll go back again looking at my overall area. If I click on, I have three different areas here, north stations, northwest, and the south. I like to use north because it shows a couple things I like to show. So north stations, and voila, it's showing me in this area here are the units in my north stations area. I have 5 of them. So the real value of this is if you have a municipality that has, we'll just say RTUs all around a county, you can show the county map and where things are on the map. If we look back at the page though, you'll see that they are green right now all the way through. Here's a legend. In my polling environment, if it's green on the inside, it's normal. If it's red on the inside, it's an alarm. If it's black on the inside, it's invalid data. So if I were to add a new station, did not have an RTU address attached to it, it's going to be invalid. It can't get there. We're also going to have some other options. If it's blinking red and black, there's an alarm that's been unacknowledged. Or how about normal unacknowledged? We're going to see that as well. On the outer ring, we can see if it's polling, if it's in a fast poll, so it's constantly pinging that one. If there's a COM error, polling has been disabled for some reason, or it's normal. Again, we're seeing green upon green, so it's just a green ball. By the way, those icons can be changed. They can be modified to make it more applicable for a particular customer. The whole idea there is they could very quickly, almost like the high performance graphics idea, they could look at the county map and say, ooh, that was an alarm. Let's just say it was this one right here that was an alarm. I can go over here, hover over it, click on it, and voila, up comes the map. Up comes my summary, for example. Up comes my statistics, my faults. I can look very fast at these points. I can now turn a pump on or off. We'll just go to off here, for example. You see it'll turn to red here in just a second. There we go. Okay, now it's in hand, now it's in off. It's in automatic. We'll see it turn back on when the level comes up and down. Under summary, this is kind of a cool thing. We're seeing that it's normal. The fault code is showing normal. Communications. is showing, click on COM status. And voila, we can see what the communication status is in the messages. Here's another for stats, another part of that stats. We can see that. So from a troubleshooting standpoint, from an operation standpoint, you can quickly see what's going on in the system. Very, very valuable, especially in times of severe weather events, because now what is really happening? The other thing you're looking at here is data age. Now this is actually clicking up and going to about a 30-second poll. That's also a modifiable point. I can right click, I can look at properties, and we're seeing what that data age is on the polling driver. Here's IO. We're looking at a 30-second interval. I could change that to 15 seconds if I wanted to and say I want to look at that point every 15 seconds. I press OK, and now we're going to see it go to a 15-second time period. That's showing the data age. Those points are also available to you for reports and those kinds of things for analysis. Again, giving you complete control.
Now, on the location of the SIPI maps, what's the different methods to get the pins onto the map?
Okay, let me show you that. So I can look at, for example, I'm going to close this thing down and this thing down. If I look at the map, I say, you know, this is station number 1, and I really knew for sure that that is not where that was. It was really supposed to be up here. I'm going to go to update site location. So, man, it should have been on this side of the highway or the road. I'm going to click it right there, and now it's been updated. That's all I have to do. But really, where is that location? Let me show you that. That's, by the way, duplexer station number 3. Let me look at my tag database again. We've gone here a number of times, of course. My water, wastewater lift stations, my north stations, and my number 3. If I right-click and look at properties, we'll see that number 1 is an MPE duplexer station, so this will be a template built already. We look at quick deployment as well. You know, the drawing methods, everybody is very similar in that way. We call them widgets, so things that are pictures that turn colors and those kinds of things. We call them widgets. You take widgets, you can make templates. You make templates, you can quickly deploy. In this case, it's a template. So if we look at that template, we'll see under the last part under display, here's the latitude and longitude of that point. I could actually modify that very quickly. If I knew the right spot, I could put that in to the template and press OK, and now it changes it.
We've actually used those as tags and pull them back from the RTU.
Yes, you can do that.
So
Absolutely.
If it does get moved.
That's right. You can do that. Yeah. In fact, some people have said, what if we did that like with we had a couple of mobile cell phones, for example. Where is that thing? We can track it around as well. Yeah, great point. If we look at a couple more spots here under communications, here's where I would define that. Under settings as well, and say, you know what, that actually should have been a 1 pump, not 2 pumps. I need to change my well levels, not 20 feet, it really was 16 feet, for example. I press OK. And now if I go back and look at that station number 3, what you'll see is it's now a single pump. And that's how quickly it took that. In fact, while it's up, let's just for fun, let's do this. I'm going to click on the tag again. Let's change it back to 2 pumps and see how fast it happens. A great indication of the power of these templates. I press properties. I can now go back to these settings. Let's go and make it back to 2 pumps. And press OK. And now it's back.
Yeah,
that quick and easy, yeah. And so it really gives you the ability of, as you deploy a network, a system of pumping stations, of lift stations, of tanks, of common filters, really anything that has multiple instances of the same thing, creating a template allows you to create it once, use it multiple times. Then if you need to modify even intricately or even that template, you can do so and now use it again somewhere else. It really gives the best, I guess, of all worlds when it comes to consistency. Now your operators can instantly go in and use the system as well. It becomes very intuitive, as we went back to.
And to use the full power of it, I think, you do have to have a PLC guy or have some standards that
is correct.
Your PLC guys
standards is so important. You know, it can't just be ad hoc programming. No, have some standards, have some methodology, have some unique tag names that are consistent throughout. Makes it so powerful. So one more thing I want to talk about, and then I'll be done with the VT SCADA part, and that is the alarm notification. It is so cool. All right, Robert, the last thing I want to show you with the VT SCADA, which always gets me excited. In fact, it seems like I'm always doing these presentations at ISA conferences or AWWA or WebTex. around alarm notifications.
I've heard your alarm notification. I've heard your alarm. You did that at VT
I
SCADA.
did. I sure did.
I heard
Absolutely. And I love that part because I come from that side of things from a usage standpoint that, operators can only do what an operator can do, and we're all bandwidth limited. So if you can make alarming powerful, if you can make it relevant, now they can do their jobs and the system runs better. So some years back, ISA did about a 10-year study, and they came out with a standard called ISA 18.2. You're kind of like the high performance graphic is 101, I believe it is. Well, this one was 18.2, and it had to do with operator fatigue. How many points, how many alarms, how many things can an operator take care of at any given moment? What I think it came back and said was an operator can handle one alarm every 2 minutes. I'm like, oh, come on, surely they're better than that. Well, you think about it, the alarm comes in, they've got to change what they're doing, they go address the alarm, understand the alarm, maybe put a note in there about it, make a phone call, take a control action. Yeah, I guess every 2 minutes is about the most they can do. And yet we configure systems with just alarms like everything's an alarm, right? Everything's important. Well, if everything's important, nothing's important, right? So we got to look at that at a great level. So if I'm looking at my overall VT SCADA screen here, what you're going to see is no longer do I have to have, surely can I do this? Absolutely, I can have the alarm banner. But instead, what I can really do is look at this icon at the top with the alarm bell. Now I have it silenced on purpose, otherwise my demo would be going off all the time. If I click on that alarm bell, it now shows me a variety of things. So I'm looking at the history right now. And under the history of this, I'm seeing colors. It seems like there's a 2, it's a square. That's all a part of ISA 18.2. Right. Yep. So they would number them 1, 2, 3, and 4, actually in 5 even, different shapes, different colors. That really allows an operator to have eyesight challenges like color blindness and still be able to be a good operator, okay? So we go back to that, and that's under the alarm summary. There's also an event summary. So every time we've been doing something here, changing values, whatever, that is logged in the event summary. Very, very important also for that event database. You can combine those together, but I don't like doing that because it mixes things up for me. For the history of the alarms, just look at the alarm database. So just thumbing across, very, very common. History, the active alarms, the unacknowledged alarms, the current alarms, great, fine. And then what about the rest of this stuff? Well, we'll talk about that in just a second. Let's look at these alarms here. So these are blinking green. And if I look back at what that training means, you would think, okay, is alarm state, green means probably it's okay again. It went to alarm, probably turned red. Now the alarm is clear, it is back in green, but it's still unacknowledged, okay? What I want to look at here with those 3 alarms is I can look at this reports and analysis, some built-in analysis. I click on this little thing here, and all of a sudden we now have this alarm report for the last 10 days saying that LM premix, which is a raw water turbidity, has gone off 229 times. Wow. There's also a default that we had here I was doing some demos here for a default roster and alarm. Been off 6 times. Okay, great. What if I look at the last 30 days? Or maybe the last 90 days? So now all of a sudden we have the ability of looking at 90 days worth of history of alarms sorted by the most common occurrences. That becomes the best friend to people like us that are developing, or to a plant manager, or maybe a O&M tech. They want to see what's been going on most often.
You can really start identifying what the issues are.
You sure can.
We've had tank levels doing that to where we walk away and there's just something blipping in their signal, and it's 1,000 alarms that have gone in and out.
Right.
And those are basically filling up the database also.
Absolutely they are, yeah. And what about maybe an RTU with some questionable communications, The wind's coming through, it's kind of messed up the cable a bit, some moisture's gotten in the connector, now all of a sudden it's timing out, getting some problems, and you come on a Monday and they say, man, this thing's been going off all weekend long. So you check this alarm log and look at the analysis, now all of a sudden you can start identifying what was going on. So watch this right here. The same thing. So I'm looking at what we call the bad actor report. And then we have the alarm flood. That tells me what times of day. So for example, October the 14th, here between those 4 hours. I can look now, it's showing 90 days here. I guess I can do the 10 days and a little bit better granularity attached to that as well. But I can see, you know what, maybe this alarm is going off every Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Maybe I should get out there and take a look at it during that time period, right? Then also we have the history and distribution of priorities. Now, all that's great and wonderful. I want to back out of this just for a second because we're looking at this raw water turbidity. I'm going to pick on that turbidity. So I'm going to close that down. Here's my turbidity warning. I'm going to right click on that point and say, I wonder what those properties are of that point. Wow, now I have my alarm properties of that tag. That went to my tag database, sucked out that point while I'm still running, by the way. And so now the operator can take a look at this and say, okay, here's what's triggering that alarm. Here's the set point. Maybe that should not be 298. Maybe it was supposed to have been a 289. Well, duh. And now we press OK. By the way, it still may go off. I don't know that answer. But the point is he has the ability, given the password authority, to go and make a modification to that tag. He doesn't have to go to the tag database. He can simply do it from right here. He could also come over here and just disable this alarm. You know what? That transmitter has gone out. We're going to disable it for now. And now I press OK and it's gone. Maybe I changed the priority of it, and I could do that as well. And then under display again, what might it be looking like? Let me take it a little further.
Well, that's a good point too on the alarm part, that you can tie a display and click on that.
That is true. That is true. Thank you for saying that. So you can tie that in together, automatically pulls up that pop-up when something occurs.
Yeah, because that's a pretty powerful instead of trying to search, how does this alarm affect the process?
Right.
It could take you directly to it, and you know that this pump failure, you have a backup pump.
Right.
Maybe it was in manual, it should be in auto, but you can at least, quickly get to it.
That's a great point. I've been out of the field so long and seeing that kind of thing take place, I overlook some of the importance, but that's exactly right. That's a great feature. So with that being said then, watch this right here. If I right click on that turbidity meter, look at this, I can click on this thing called go to page. It now displays every page at that point is actually on. So another great thing to do from analysis, and I can now click on that directly and go see that point. And by the way, here it is, right? Let me go back to my alarm summary. And I'm going to right click on it this time, and I'm going to look at the details of that point. Now this is kind of cool. This is reading from my tag database, my details, as well as my configuration. But here's what I get most excited about, statistics. That says that has gone off 73 times today. Now granted, I'm running a demo. It's supposed to go off all the time like that. But if it wasn't a demo, you would get a great idea of how many times it's been off in the last 10 days. Maybe the operator thought it went off all weekend, but really it only went off a couple of times. But that's an important thing from him as well. And then finally, I want to put a note in here, and maybe my note says George will replace replace the bulb next Wednesday. That's a whole week from now. Okay. Well, I'm a little bit concerned. If I'm the operator, I'm a little bit concerned. I mean, okay, it's on there. By the way, if I press OK, what you notice is on the top right-hand side, there's the note icon. Okay? But I've said next Wednesday. Well, I don't want this stupid thing going off all Thanksgiving long. So I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to go to this thing called Shelve. Shelve is one of the most powerful features from my opinion. So I go back to the days, again, we're old, gray hairs, no hairs. I'm out on the no hair side. And what happened in the old days was you had a pen alarm or a Ronin or some other alarm enunciator. And what would happen is, for those guys that don't know this kind of stuff, is the alarm would go off and the light would start flashing. And this obnoxious horn would be going off. So you get up there quickly and press the button, and the horn goes off, and the light goes solid. Now you know it's an alarm point. Well, that's great until about 20 minutes later when it does it again. I'm over there all the time pressing that button, right? In the old days, what we used to do for testing purposes was we pulled that little circuit board out by about 1/8 of an inch, and then we lost it. No more problems then.
Not shelving it.
Exactly. We shelved it, or disabled it actually, didn't we? But you know what? It was no longer a problem for us. Well, here's what we've done in that case. Instead of disabling it, we've shelved it. We said, okay, you know what? I just made a comment that it is now shelved till next Wednesday. So I'll click here and say next Wednesday, the 28th. And it's going to come in UPS. I assume let's say 10 o'clock. I press OK. Oh, come on. Did I do the wrong? Click on the wrong thing. Let's try that real quick. Shelve it for the Wednesday, 10 a.m. There we go. And so now it is no longer on my current alarm list. It is on my shelve list. Here's what's so powerful about that. While this is being shelved, it will not bother my operator anymore. It's not going to do the alarm horn. It's not going to do the alarm dial out or text. It will, however, log every time it goes off. So now when DEP comes to me and says, let me see your log of this alarm, I can show them that alarm. And it'll list every single one of those, but it won't alarm my operator. So if you look at my history now, you'll see under the history tab,
Now, if it's disabled, though, it doesn't show up in that?
does not show up at all. It
Okay,
is,
so that's why I was wondering when it showed the indefinite.
Right.
What was the difference in indefinite and disabled, basically?
it would still show it up.
So, yeah, that's right.
That's right, yeah, so
That makes
indefinite
sense.
means that, yeah, until you unshelve it, that's right. So, yeah, that's great, so let's look at that real quick. So we got this shelve point here, and it's showing that it's been shelved. It shows who shelved it, and it was user Alan. Let's go back to our shelve thing. You're exactly right. Let's look at that and say, let's go back to, I can't modify that right here, so I'll go back to current. I'll shelve it again. If I go to my indefinite, then you're right. Let's just say I'm waiting on that to come in. It's on a slow boat from China, and I press OK. It is now my shelve list, but it is no longer going to affect me as time goes on. That's so different than disabled. Disabled takes it off the list altogether. That's what makes me excited about the alarming thing, because it really comes into how does it help an operator run his plant. SCADA should not be the end all. No, we're just a tool to help the operators run a plant more effectively. We're a tool to help the plant manager supply good water to the person who wants to get a sip of water out of the sink. We're a tool for those that take the wastewater, clean it up before it's injected into wherever it ends up going. It should be a tool that is useful for them and not a hindrance for them. That's where, to me, the whole instantly intuitive thing comes into play. That the software is intuitive all across the board. That's why I'm so glad to be working for VT SCADA. You can tell I get pretty passionate when I'm talking about this, perhaps more so than I should sometimes.
Hey, well, you definitely know a lot about all the features and can
thanks.
take us through all of them.
Good. Well, only because I get a chance to show it all the time. It's one of my favorite things to do. But again, all I can show you what's default. You guys are the ones that make it do magic. And the end users are the ones that get to go make it really shine and work for them.
Well, it's definitely impressive software. I mean, from the alarming to the reporting, just to the creation of them, and even the widgets. Some of that you didn't even really go through too much of just the
Right.
whole library of even just the face plates and
That's
things.
like 4,500 of those different widgets and objects and pictures. Yeah,
Yeah, so those are impressive too. That someone's
they are.
got in there and created those.
Yeah, and by the way, if you download the free version, that 50 tag version, they're all included. So take them and use them however you want to. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate having you today.
My pleasure
Enjoyed.
to be here. Thank you so much for letting me come in, Robert.
Thanks for being our first guest.
Absolutely. It's good.